Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Boy, what an amazing light show that we had last night in the form of the Aurora Borealis. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I have gotten no sleep at all in trying to stay up for the Northern Lights. I'll tell you my story and what happened to me here in a bit, but I gotta say, the footage that's coming out from people across the world from last night's Northern Lights is just spectacular. I guess, I'm not going to lie, and I'm not just BSing here. I kind of got a little emotional myself seeing a lot of the footage. It just, seeing that, and then we just had the solar eclipse here in the lower 48 just a few weeks ago. It just goes to show how amazing science is. I mean, science is cool, as Bill Nye used to say. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'm not like an astronomer. I never really studied beyond meteorology. Meteorology is really my strong suit. But boy, there is just so much amazing things that come from space and astronomy. So many different concepts that I can't even wrap my mind around. And the seeing Earth's magnetic field in action last night with that solar flare and the sun activity, all of that is just spectacular. And if anything, as a scientist myself, I hope that this inspires the next generation of people coming up through the field to study science in STEM, because things like these just kind of wake people up to the idea that science is pretty badass. So anyway, all diatribes aside, here's what happened to me yesterday. I went out 20-30 minutes away from where I live. Now, I live in the Chicago suburbs. There's quite a bit of light pollution. I wanted to get away from that. So what I did was I went 20 to 30 minutes west into the cornfields of Illinois. This would have been around 10, 11 o'clock p.m. my time. Now, what happened was I saw all the photos coming in from friends on my Snapchat of the Aurora Borealis just vibrant across much of Illinois. And so my thought was, all right, cool. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go do it myself, just like anybody else would. The problem was I made an impulse decision and didn't realize that those photos were taken at 8 o'clock at the height of the proton flux. Still, I went out into the cornfields of Illinois at 11 o'clock and I didn't see a damn thing. It was so cloudy. The stratus deck rolled in. We had that clipper move through, some spotty showers, even a couple rumbles of thunder. So my next decision was, after being rained out and cloudy and driving 30 minutes into a cornfield for nothing, my next decision was, all right, am I going to stay out here? Or am I going to go home and just stay up? I decided that I'm going to just go home and stay up. So I went home, got into bed, studying some physics, right? And kind of looking more into this, Space Weather Prediction Center website that I've yet to even divulge in myself. And I fall asleep. I wake up at 7 in the morning, and my original idea was just to go back home and then go back out once this clipper system moved through, so that way I could go out there, I'd have clear skies, and there would be no precipitation, and then hopefully the Northern Lights would peak again. Because we were sort of in a lull when I first went out there, even despite the fact that it was clouded over. Excuse me. The other issue that we had was that we were in sort of a lull period. Remember, these Northern Lights sort of oscillate and come in waves. So we were at kind of like that low period. So then, I was thinking to myself, all right, well, it's raining. We're sort of in a lull. I'm just going to go back out there once it clears out around 2. And then by that point, maybe things will be better and we'll be back at that peak again with our proton flux. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But the problem is, I fell asleep. So I am left to watch yet more photos and more videos of people getting the auroras. I have to admit, I'm a little bit butthurt about that. I would be totally lying to you if I wasn't. However, there is another opportunity to see Northern Lights tonight. This goes for you guys that didn't have a chance to see it last night. Regardless of what the circumstance was, there is another opportunity to see it both this evening into tomorrow morning and then possibly into Monday. We shall see. But the best next opportunity you're going to find out is in the immediate short term. So that's going to be the focus of today's video. We're going to be talking about the next opportunity to see some northern lights for folks that didn't have the chance to do so and are just like me and are jealous as hell that everybody else has footage and you don't. So if you do enjoy today's video, be sure to like and subscribe, share it with family and friends. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. So the latest from the Space Weather Prediction Center is that we have a severe G4 geomagnetic conditions. We actually had a G5 this morning as of 6:54 a.m. local time. But the current indication is that we are going into either a G3 or a G4. Now, just because we're not expected necessarily to get a G5 doesn't mean that you're not going to have the opportunity to see the northern lights. Still, G3 and G4 conditions are still conducive for some very vibrant northern lights. It's just going to be a little bit maybe further north. You may not be able to see it as well defined in places like Louisiana and Alabama like you did last night. But if you're in places like the Midwest and the northern tier of the United States, you should have an opportunity, a second chance to see those later on this evening into tomorrow morning. Here's how we know that. We'll start by taking a look at the CME, the coronal mass ejections. And this is really cool. Look at all these CMEs that are firing up over the last several hours. And this actually goes all the way back to tomorrow morning. If you're wondering why we're seeing what we're seeing, it's because of all the CME activity that's been shooting off the sun here over the course of the last day. And so remember that these CMEs take a bit to reach Earth. So if we see another one of these CME ejections, which we likely will because there's quite a bit of sunspot activity on the sun right now, then we would then see more solar flares and thereby northern lights by the time we get to tonight and tomorrow morning, which is exactly what we expect considering the activity that we're seeing at the moment. Now, just a recap, here's our current GOES proton flux. If you can tell the best time it was to see the northern lights yesterday, you would be right in saying around 7 to 8 o'clock Central Standard Time, because if you correlate that to your GOES proton flux, we had the biggest spike right around, what would be towards kind of the evening of yesterday. And let's actually zoom in a little bit more here and show this. Yeah, so there we go. So this would have been, kind of in the evening. And then we had the morning as well. So there's really two opportunities to see that sort of proton flux spike. And when you see that proton flux spike, that essentially is going to correlate to more vibrant northern lights. So correlating that to where we're at right now, still relatively high. So we are still seeing some northern lights in areas that are dark right now on the other side of Earth, likely in places like Russia and in the Eastern Pacific. But for the most part, it's pretty quiet right now because the sun is up. So the expectation is that we're going to see this spike yet again by the time we get towards this evening and into tomorrow morning. Best opportunity really is going to be within, say, the evening into, say, 2, 3 a.m. Sunday morning. And it's a really rough time frame, guys. You really can't nail down a specific time. It's going to be pretty dicey. Remember, these things oscillate. You can even tell just looking at the X-ray flux. Notice how we're not linear. We're not just increasing, we're just straight up fluctuating. And remember, these solar flares oscillate, they come in waves. And it's not even an oscillation, it's just more of it is somewhat of an oscillation. In that when they arrive, right, they're not just going to be consistent, they're going to arrive in waves. So that's what we're seeing here. You can indicate that by both your GOES proton flux and your X-ray flux. But then finally, the best place to see the northern lights not just is going to be contingent on our space weather, but it's also going to be contingent on our weather at home. So here's the latest cloud cover forecast for the lower 48. And I got some bad news for you guys in the south. We are going to cloud up quite a bit tonight, and you can thank that occluded low pressure system out towards the Four Corner States for that. That's going to keep kicking up some Pacific flow. And as it does so, and as that low moves across the plateaus and through the Rockies, it's going to somewhat amplify and thereby produce additional cloud cover. So a lot of the Gulf Coast, even if we were seeing G5 conditions tonight, even if we do, the problem is your cloud cover is going to be pretty thick. So much of the Gulf going into this morning and Sunday is going to be very hit and miss. Not really a great opportunity to see the northern lights for folks that didn't see it yesterday, I hate to tell you. Now, I will say there is some breaks in the clouds within Alabama and Mississippi tonight, and then also northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. So there is some ample opportunity, but it's going to be very dicey for those of you that are looking to do so. The best places to see it, though, is actually going to be the lower Great Lakes. You guys really didn't have it well yesterday for folks that were going this morning. You still were able to see the northern lights, but there were some kind of breaks in the clouds that allowed you to do so. Thankfully, tonight into tomorrow morning, things should be clear on the heels of the passing of that polar jet. Remember, we had that Clipper system move through the Chicagoland region and much of the lower Great Lakes last night that caused some shower and thunderstorm activity. That has now moved off to the southeast, and behind that cold front, we should see some cooler temperatures today and tonight, and also some clear skies to see the northern lights. Once again, though, we also have the Pacific Northwest. You guys had it made yesterday, let me tell you. It is now going to be clear yet again for the second night in a row, but this time for a broader region from the Central Rockies all the way westward into the coastal and the Pacific Northwest, the coastal West Coast, I should say. So best opportunities to see the northern lights tonight, especially if we're going to be seeing that G3, G4 criteria with our geomagnetic storm, is going to be the lower Great Lakes as well as the Pacific Northwest. One thing that I forgot to mention is that just because we're not under a G5 right now doesn't mean that we won't see it again tonight. I want to highlight that for today into tomorrow morning, we have a 95% chance of seeing R1, R2 criteria, as well as a 75% chance of seeing R3 and R5. R3 and R5 is the more significant criteria for a geomagnetic storm. R1 and R2 criteria typically implies that we're going to see northern lights, but it'd be mostly confined to the poleward regions as opposed to what we've seen yesterday across the lower 48. So, ideally, we'd be looking more so for an R3, R5 designation. This may also continue into Monday as well. And actually, yeah, it does. Sunday and a Monday. So this geomagnetic storm could last even a few days, and that means even more opportunities to see the northern lights. So this is going to really last over the next couple of days. It just remains to be seen if we're going to see this upgraded to a G5. So that leads to my disclaimer. For those of you that are watching this video right now, be sure to check the latest information from the Space Weather Prediction Center, because this is coming out in the morning. Once you see it in the morning or as you're watching this video, check this website for the latest conditions and information. And other than that, thank you all so much for tuning in to today's video. I know we didn't talk about severe weather today. It is a very limited threat for southwestern Texas from places like El Paso going eastward. Damaging winds and hail is going to be the primary threat there. And then we do expect our severe weather to kick back up on Monday, as we're already seeing a slight risk issued for Houston all the way back once again to the Dallas Metroplex. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next video. Take care.